Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 16 of SuperSports, the review series for the vehicles of Gran Turismo, which are not quite full-on supercars, but are nevertheless purer in form and faster than your average sports car. They're generally more exotic and oftentimes more exclusive, and this car certainly ticks all of those boxes. It's the 2003 Shelby Series 1 Supercharged. It's a very interesting little car. Looks kind of like an updated Cobra from many angles. Similar headlight arrangement, similar grille, similar overall muscular appearance. Almost like a Cobra for the 21st century. It's not really marketed as that though. It's marketed more as a Corvette rival, or a rival to the road-going version of Panos's Aspirante. And I've always liked the Shelby Series 1, to be honest. I think it's a very good-looking car, and it's a very interesting alternative to some of the more obvious supersports choices. Now that said, many people still don't give this car its due on Gran Turismo. Not just on GT6, but on previous games as well. It's one of those vehicles which tends to get kind of forgotten in the mass of vehicles that are on the game, because there are some real standout gems featured through the series of Gran Turismo games that people just don't really get the chance to fully appreciate. Vehicles like the Shelby Series 1, the Callaway C12 also comes to mind on some of the older games, cars like the Jensen Interceptor or the Ginetta G4, vehicles which have very small pockets of staunch fans, but for the most part don't get much recognition from the community at large for just how good they are and how competitive they are as alternatives from the norm. This is one of those vehicles. Now, it's not without its faults, certainly not. It's a pretty expensive car at almost 185,000 credits, and you can get supercars for that kind of money. So what does it have to offer for that price? Well, as the name suggests, it's supercharged, and the engine in question is a 4-litre V8. It produces fully tuned 694 horsepower, which is quite modest for an American performance car. They tend to be quite big numbers that they produce, so this one's quite modest in that way. And in fact, the engine itself is relatively modest for an American car. Quite small, being 4 litres. Generally 4.6 or 4.7 would be the minimum for a vehicle of this type. So it kind of bucks the trend in a few ways, and it has an aura about the car which is almost kind of a European vibe going about it. Not only in its look, but also in its performance style. Because whereas typically American performance cars are fairly mainstream, quite affordable, good value for money, they have relatively high weight and also high power with a large engine. That's the typical, or stereotypical, American performance car. This car is almost opposite to those in every way. It has a smaller engine than you'd think, less power than you'd think, it's more expensive than you'd expect, not mainstream by any means, it's very obscure as far as supersports cars go, and it's not heavy at all. In fact, it's a lot lighter than it looks. This car only weighs a fraction over 1,000 kilos, and that is very, very competitive. What about its performance though? Because low weight and what is still a very high power output of almost 700 horses would surely make it a fast car. Well, yes it does. Obviously it's going to be a fast car. In fact, it's one of the best cars in the game for the performance that it gets from its respective power. This car can do around 270 miles per hour from its under 7 horsepower output. So that's very good value and very good bang for buck. The power to weight ratio as well is very good for its power, because it's fairly easy to have a high power to weight ratio if you've got a silly amount of power to begin with. This car though doesn't. It's relatively modest even for a super sports car at 694 horsepower fully kitted out. It still though puts out 690 horsepower per tonne because the weight is so low. It also has a relatively modest amount of torque, but at the same time for such a light car, it's more than enough to get the job done, at 582 pound-feet. And the PP is also pretty reasonable, perhaps a little bit higher than you might expect at 607 PP, but that does give you an indication of how good Polyphony considers this car to be with their in-game rating system. 607 is pretty high for that kind of spec. And it's deserving of it, because this car is a very, very good unsung hero of Gran Turismo 6. Not only is it incredibly quick for top speed in a straight line for its power, but it's also very competitive around the track. The ultra low weight means that regardless of its power, it's very fast. You can have this car down to say 350 or 400 horsepower and it will still make a phenomenal track machine. In fact, in many ways, it's the perfect rival for vehicles like the Cobra or TVRs. It's that same kind of vehicle, and it's very, very good for its PP, for its power, and just for its class in general. So, if you have never tried the Shelby Series 1, and I doubt there are many people who have never tried it, but if you haven't, I would strongly recommend that you give this car the use that it deserves, because it's a brilliant little vehicle that is severely underappreciated by the community at large. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.